now let's address the preparation section. It is Rochelle Eisen from British Columbia that is the convener of the preparation working group. Rochelle, what was your overall focus with your working group? How did you manage your mandate?
Well, yeah, thanks, Nicole. The mandate for this particular working group was very broad. It included Section 8, which is the preparation and handling of organic products. It included the definitions in Section 3, the introduction sections for 32.310, and Section 10 in 32.310, which addresses the criteria for amending the PSL, the Permitted Substance List.
So you had a large mandate. So what can you describe to us some of your highlights?
Well, it's a blur. I should say that first. But we did quite a bit of work in 1.4 in the prohibitions. We reorganized the entire preparation and handling sections of 310. We cleaned up the definitions in Section 3, and we also did some editorial work in Section 1, the introductions. Plus, we rewrote all of the Section 10 on how to amend the PSL.
So to come to the specifics, can you explain what has changed in 1.4 regarding the various prohibitions?
Well, to start off, there are no new prohibitions, but we reorganized them. The key thing we did is we moved nanotechnology higher up in the hierarchy because it was right at the bottom in the current version. And we moved it up because it's an overarching prohibition across all the parts of the standards, and some of the other prohibitions are only relevant to certain sections. So the other key thing that happened in 1.4 is we expanded the vaccine exemption in 1.4a to cover all PSL listed substances that they themselves are not genetically engineered, but might have been propagated using the substrates or growth media containing GE ingredients. This is what Janine was sort of alluding to a little while ago. Anyways, the big thing here, what's changed is that if the listed substance contains remnants of that substrate or growth media, then that substrate ingredient has to be listed in the PSL. So that's if you buy the substance and there's remnants, those remnants have to be listed on the PSL. It has to comply with the PSL. But if there are no traces of that substrate, then you need to try to buy that product without a GAE base, and if you can't, then you can proceed and buy the product that you've selected.
So can you give us some examples of the substances that are impacted by this change?
Well, sure. It covers such things as yeasts, like any type of yeast that you would use in any type of production system, so livestock feed and supplements, and also in processing manufacturing. It also impacts vitamins, particularly B and C, all microbial products, enzymes, cultures, compost starters, biological organisms, amino acids, and all sorts of other acids like ascorbic, citric, and lactic, and even xanthan gum.
Okay, Rochelle, I need a specific example. Me, I am a producer. I buy enzymes. I know, and so I have to to summarize, I have to verify that to check if those enzymes, the input of this product that I use, is still containing some residues from the substrate it was grown on. Is that correct?
Yep. So you'd have to start off to make sure the enzyme itself wasn't genetically engineered, which shouldn't be the case, because usually with enzyme it's just the production, the manufacturing system that could be questionable. So they could have been using a corn extract as the growing media, and that corn extract, you'd have to do that due diligence to see, is it cured, is it in the final product that you bought, or not?
Then it has to be listed.
Beg pardon?
Then it would have to be listed on the PSL.
Yeah, so if it turns out that it's corn, well, then it's not listed on the PSL. So then you're in that magic place. Was it genetically engineered or not? And if it's not genetically engineered, then and it's not there, you don't have a problem. But if it's there, then you need to say, can I find an equivalent product that didn't use corn as the base?
Okay, thank you. And so also you were responsible for the definition section. What are the significant changes in this specific section?
Who would ever think that a definition section could take so much work? I couldn't believe how much time that took. But the big things that really happened there is the definitions for biodegradable and synthetic substances have been improved. And we added definitions for removal event, food grade, incidental additives, isolation distances, prebiotics, and probiotics in no particular order.
And the handling and preparation section, what are the main changes that you introduced?
Well, I've been thinking about this, Nicole. I don't think we did a lot of changes, but nobody's going to recognize it. We actually did. We tried to make the things clear. So the first thing we did is we moved the product composition requirements to Section 9. So Section 9 is just about what is the profile of a product now. How do you do that calculation? What does it look like? And then Section 8, we changed the title to Maintaining Integrity During Cleaning, Preparation, and Transportation. And that whole section, the preamble for Section 8, now explains that Section 8 is relevant to cleaning of all facilities, all pest management in a facility, storing requirements, and this is if they occur on or off farm, and also it covers the requirements for transportation.
And also the processing facilities. So it covers livestock, processing, transportation, or storage.
Yep. Yeah, you got it. And then also in Section 8, we did a lot of work around packaging because there was some confusion about what was really the expectation with regard to packaging material requirements, making sure it was clear that packaging cannot be the product of GE. But in the case of nanotechnology, all an operator has to confirm is that there is no risk of transference of nanoparticles to an organic product. So different criteria there between the two prohibitions with regards to packaging. Let's see, also in Section 8, just before you ask me any more questions, Nicole, we've added a big section about incidental additives, and that's to do with hand products like cleaners, sanitizers, hand lotions. It's also culinary steam, cleaning and sanitizing substances, and any type of lubricants that would be used in a manufacturing system. We made it clear that those can't compromise organic integrity.
And finally, in Section 9, what have you done?
Well, again, we spent a lot of time rewriting it, hopefully that we understood it, because it's a very dense section. Everybody thinks they understand it until you start poking at it. So what we did is we tried to make it easier to use with. We had clarifying language. And the key thing I think we really did is we really tried to emphasize that, that organic products should consist mainly of organic, whole, or processed agricultural ingredients and processing aids, and that, over-processed ingredients should be minimized. And that, and the other big thing that we did, we tried to make it really clear that ingredient subparts need to be evaluated. So it was very clear in the our current version, that when you did the math on the calculation, you had to consider all the non-organic components in a multi-ingredient product or ingredient, whichever way you want to call it. But now we're sort of saying, no, you just don't have to do the math. You have to make sure that every sub-ingredient is actually compliant with the standard.
Can you remind us of the title of Section 9, Rochelle?
I think we called it simply the product composition. I think it's organic product composition.
Thank you. Thank
You're
you very
welcome.
much, Rochelle. I think it surely will make the standard much clearer. And for the permitted substances list and processing, the convener of the working group is Amy Kremen. Hi, Amy.
Hi, Nicole.
So what was your focus when you accepted this mandate? What was your group's focus?
Well, I took the convener position partway through the 2-year review process. Roxanne Beavers had begun the work, and when she passed things on to me, I had already been on the working group, so I had a sense of what was going on. And then continuing the work, it became clear that a lot of the issues that we were facing had to do with that the PSL could use some work to make it clearer and easier to read, so that wading through all the material was actually making it harder to interpret the different annotations. And so it seemed that that became a clear theme of doing whatever we could to shorten the language, tighten things up in a way that would make the document much more friendly to use. Another goal of the group that emerged through the work, based on some of the things that Rochelle just mentioned about incidental additives and culinary steam and some different issues that were posed to both her working group and the processing PSL working group, had to do with making sure that the PSL, the annotations, the substances listed there, reflect adequately the current practices in the processing sphere. So it's a dynamic area. Processing processes are constantly changing, and we needed to make sure that not only the processing substances but the cleaners that are listed are sufficient and adequate to reflect the current reality being practiced in the sector.
So can you give us some examples of the notable changes that were made?
Okay, well, to start out with, we'll just begin at the beginning. The PSL's introductory text at the very beginning of the document, and also for all of the sections, and especially in the processing section, has been revised. Previously, or in the current version, that text was very basic and just more or less descriptive of what the PSL was about. That wording has now been revised. So at the start of the PSL and also in the text that appears before each PSL section, so section 4, 5, and 6, and 7, there's binding text that is there to remind readers of key requirements that appear in the main standard 32310, that are specific, that are there because they're meaningful for substance users and the sourcing of substances. So, for example, some requirements such as commercial availability in regard to sourcing substances, or the GE restrictions that have now already been discussed by some of the other conveners. Those reminders are now placed into the document both at the beginning and prior to each section. I think that's an important addition because it helps remind people of these very key tenets that are central to basic organic principles, and how that plays out in practice all the way down to the use of a particular substance.
So all the introductory texts in PSL livestock, PSL crop, and PSL processing are similar, are explaining the same principles.
That's right. And a nice thing that did was that some of the key reminders for those requirements have appeared within substance annotations, which makes substance annotations long and also lengthens the overall PSL document. By pulling those out of the individual substance listing annotations and putting them before the section, it reminds readers that these requirements apply to all of the listings in the standard, and it shortens the document, thus making it easier to read.
So when we look at the 2006 version and the new version, we see a lot of numbering changes in the tables. So can you summarize what are the changes and why you changed some numbers of the tables?
Sure. I think that when people see the numbers, they might say, oh, there's been some big changes, but actually it just has to do with reorganization of some content. There is no content change itself. It's just found in a little bit has been changed in terms of the presentation of content that is already existing. So for example, there's in the 2006 version, Table 6.5 has 4 substances. These are specific to, they can be used for products from 70 to 95% content. Those 4 substances have now been moved to new homes, whether it's the food additives table, the non-food additive ingredient table, or the processing aids tables. So it didn't seem to make sense to have a special table for 4 substances. Instead, we just took the requirement that those substances could, those 4, which are used for 70 to 95% organic products, we included that requirement in the substance listing annotation, and those substances are now found in their proper places, whether they're food additives, non-food additive ingredients, or processing aids. And those tables are respectively tables 6.3, 6.4, and 6.5. The other change is that the current table 6.7, which is pest control substances, has now been moved to a new section of the PSL. It's a new section 8. And this is a section that pertains to substances used in facilities. It's comprised of 2 tables. One is the pest control substances, and the other one is for tables that are used to maintain crop quality post-harvest. And the nice thing about having this separate section is that it reminds all readers who may not just be processors, but may be people who handle crops, people who store crops, or anybody who's using facilities, which substances can be used in facilities. So it doesn't specifically apply to processing. Previously, some of these, okay, I'll just stop there. I think I made my point.
So okay, so you reorganized the tables and you did some new numbering, but you also worked at the level of the substances themselves. So what are the main changes that you introduce in the annotations or in the sequence of substances in the tables?
Okay. Well, the main change that readers will notice is that we got rid of quite a lot of repetition. For example, redundant substance entries, we worked hard to identify them and remove them. In some cases, we combined several similar substances that really belong together as one listing. And so, for example, substances which used to appear as multiple listings, for example, different kinds of acids or different kinds of gums, there used to be multiple listings for either of those. Or even something like the 2 listings, cornstarch and starch. Listings like that have now been amalgamated where possible. So we have one listing for acids now that covers all the different acids, and we have one listing for gums that covers all the different kinds of gums that are permitted on the PSL. And this sort of change makes information easier to find, and it makes the PSL much shorter to encounter.
Yeah.
Another change that is worth noting is that this is true in the processing section, but also more globally throughout the PSL. We stepped back and looked at the language and the way that annotations are, the annotation text is presented. Annotations in the PSL have typically described what is prohibited. And what we've done is we've taken a step back and then looked at how we can, since those prohibitions are stated in 310 and the reminders are now at the beginning of the sections, the annotation space can be used actually to describe what is permitted. We found that revising annotations this way, stating them in the positive in terms of what is permitted, actually makes the presentation of the sourcing requirements and the usage requirements actually much more precise, much easier to understand, much more easy to understand.
And you also, are there more commercial availability requirements?
Oh, that's interesting. So yeah, so when people are reading the document, they'll probably notice what looks like more commercial availability requirements, but actually we haven't added any new or very few new commercial availability requirements for using organics or organically sourced substances or non-synthetically sourced substances on the PSL. This is what we've done simply is we've just stated more clearly in annotations when those requirements apply. So those requirements may have most likely have been applicable in the 2006 version. All we've done is state it more clearly.
So now,
Amy, it's Ted. Just to ask a question quickly. One of the problems we've had in the past with the PSL was that some substances had notation describing limitations as to origin and usage, and others did not, and there was some disagreement over when there's no annotation, does that mean that there are no limitations, that there are no requirements as to the usage or origin? Has that been cleared up now in the present publication?
I think it's been improved in the sense that the framework where the prohibitions reminders are included at the beginning of each section, and people have the information is there to remind people what should not be done in a very specific yet global sense. And so that means that when you come across within a table an annotation, or excuse me, a substance listing with a blank annotation, some requirements are already attached to that blank spot. Does that make sense? There is no annotation that is lacking a requirement, is lacking any constraints. The organic production constraints are provided in 310 and again in 311, and they're applicable to all listed substances, depending on which requirements apply to which substances. But yeah, you could say that the annotation text that you see when you do see wording that's either for usage and or a sourcing requirement, that's above and beyond. These are additional constraints that have been pointed out that are added for clarity because we know that the sourcing or use of a particular substance may pose a problem if it was sourced in a way or used in a way that we know it could be done that would not be consistent with organic principles. That's why that additional text then appears in an annotation.
Very good, thank you.
So besides the structural changes that you made to the permitted substances list and processing, can you mention a few specific changes that you've done to substances themselves?
Sure thing. Okay, so one change that we have made is to the waxes listings. There are two in Table 6.3 for food additives and Table 6.6 for processing aids. And what we've done there is provide much clearer text with regard to which waxes can be used for produce and which waxes can be used for other situations. And we've added a new bit which has to do with allowing waxes to be used to coat organic cheese, which I think will be much appreciated by organic cheese producers. A second change that we've made is to the yeast listing, which importantly now clarifies that yeast can be certified organic. Another change is that a new listing for collagen casings has been added, and those will be permitted for use in making fresh poultry sausage. We have added a new substance listing category. It's called extraction solvents, precipitation aids, and carriers. And what that substance listing does is it helps to clarify how certain substances listed on the PSL are to be derived in a manner consistent with organic principles. I'll tell you two more. The first being yeast foods. And a listing has been added for yeast foods for use in the production of alcoholic beverages. And that was added to fill a gap in the standard. And finally, we updated the vitamins and mineral nutrients listing. It amalgamated a couple of different vitamins listings on the PSL, found in different places, and the language also now reflects it adequately reflects federal and mandatory and voluntary requirements for fortification in a way that is actually current and relevant to current organic processing practices.
And finally, you spent also time discussing about cleaning and disinfection substances. Can you tell us about that? What are the changes to these substances?
Sure. Okay, I'm going to tell you, I've got, that brings to mind the changes to substances and one change to the tables. I'll start with the change to the tables. Actually, I guess they're kind of related. We revised a few annotations in tables 7.3 and 7.4. These are the cleaning and disinfection substance tables. And these are slight changes that were made to make it clear that table 7.3 lists substances to be used without a removal event, while table 7.4 lists substances to be permitted only if followed by a removal event. The tables are almost set up that way completely. What we've done, the revisions we've made actually makes that split between the two tables to be used allowed without a removal event versus only allowed with a removal event much, much clearer. And we're hoping that makes using the PSL Section 7 easier. And then there's one other important change to the introduction text of Section 7, in which we've added clarifying language for how operators should be verifying the ingredients of their cleaning products that they're using if they plan to use such cleaning products without a removal event.
Great. Thank you very much, Amy. So now we have Dag Falk. Dag was called the All PSL convener. Dag has a long experience in organic processing, and so he was attending most of the PSL meetings and overseeing that this process was well understood. Can you tell us about your experience, Dag, as the All PSL convener?
Yeah. Well, first of all, it was my job was facilitated greatly by the work group conveners, who really did all the technical work and all the dealt with all the details of each substance and each change. So my role is more to do with the process. So I kind of step back from the detail and review the process to make sure that it's consistent between the working groups, and so that also the presentation to the technical committee is in a consistent manner and following the same kind of format.
So on the overall, are you satisfied with, because the 32.311 that are the permitted substances list, we hear that there are many changes. Are you satisfied with how these changes were introduced and with the results?
Yes, definitely. And I expected it to be a lot more work in the role for the All PSL to address the issues of the 5-year review that the standard is. It wasn't just going through the standards and looking at changes. It was the review of the whole standard, and that's why reorganization of the sections and numbering and all of that happened at the same time. And I expected it to be more work to be involved with that process, but because the conveners were so keenly involved with and understanding those issues as well, they just incorporated that into their work, and so it was all kind of done organically, and that's a pun. But so it came together very, very well, and I'm very pleased with the results. Yep.
Yeah, thank you, Dag. I am now pleased to invite Ted Zettel, the convener of the permanent PSL working group, to present the activities of that working group. So, Ted, why was this working group created?
Permitted substances list has gone in tandem with the standard as a whole when it comes to revision, which means that no modification to the PSL, to the annotations, or no additions or deletions of substances could occur without opening up for review the entire organic standard. Now, many people voiced the concern that without some more flexible and fluent way of revising the PSL, that our producers were placed at a disadvantage. Other countries would have access to substances, new substances sometimes that came out, or changes to their standards that would allow them greater flexibility, more tools to use in both production and processing. And because our standard didn't allow us to modify the PSL outside of a general revision and review of the standard, we would be left with whatever we had at the last revision. It was also recognized that there may be much more, let's say, efficient, economical, and less time-consuming ways to work on the PSL. So my mandate with the committee was to investigate that and to come up with some recommendations, which we did, and the recommendations generally were accepted by the technical committee.
And what are these main recommendations? Are to have a permanent committee that would review the permitted substances list, or?
Yeah, the recommendation is that there would be established a process that would be ongoing. So it would carry on continuously, regardless of the process, the existence of a review or the in-between reviews of the whole standard. It would still be very much the same as the current system is. So it would still be under the Canadian General Standards Board. It would conform to all of their policies and procedures. It would probably involve most of the people that are working on the PSL working groups now. So those are still the experts within the sector who need to be consulted. So the key difference that would be that the process of generating proposals for revision would be ongoing. And then those proposals would be accepted or rejected by the technical committee through an electronic means. So this would relieve us of the very costly step of convening the entire technical committee in order to authorize and to make into law any revision to the PSL. But it would still be the same people. It would still be the same body that has authority. Nothing could be changed without the approval of the technical committee, similarly to the way it's always acted in the past.
So what are the next steps? The technical committee has adopted the permanent revision of the PSL. It has been approved.
Yes. So the technical committee has authorized the development of this permanent PSL committee. The one snag that we have is that we really don't have a funding source to resource the establishment of the committee. So that is the point where we're stopped right now, is on establishing a funding mechanism.
As a conclusion, I would just like to hear from you, all of you. Are you satisfied with the results, and do you have a message to the producers? Would it be easy to implement the revised standard? What would be your message to the sector?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think I'd like to say that I'm very pleased with the new 2015 Canadian Organic Standards. I think we had many issues that were clarified for greater understanding in the application of the standard. There was some of the new participants that participate in the process that were very pleased with the level of respect among the various people that were involved. Some of the issues in the standard previously that were weak have been enhanced to move the standard ahead, and I think we have a better product. I encourage all farmers and food producers to review the standards carefully, make sure their operations are meeting the new standards, and I encourage consumers to understand that organic food producers are producing an organic product that's among the best in the world.
Hear, hear.
So thank you. We heard Hugh Martin, the chair of the technical committee. So I thank you, all the working group conveners that have participated to the current presentation. We really hope that the producers will appreciate hearing the main modifications that are brought to the standards. And We invite all the organic producers to go visit the website of the Organic Federation of Canada to get any additional information, and we will talk again at the next review in 5 years or before on the permanent PSL committee. Thank you.
Thank you so much,
Thank you.
Nicole. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Nicole.